Hi, that's Becky.
And this is Todd.
We thought it'd be kind of fun to go through a rundown of our favorite tips. Now, these tips generally show up in our newsletters, and some in our Vectric newsletter, and some of them in our Design and Make newsletter right at the very top. If you like tips and you really find these handy, then definitely you should sign up for those newsletters. You can go to vectric.com and sign up for the Vectric newsletter, and then head over to the store.designandmake.com and sign up for the Design and Make newsletter there.
Yeah, so great resource for your top tips. But not only that, if you're following us across social media, so Facebook and Instagram, every Tuesday we generally release a top tip or a Tip Tuesday video, 60-second video. That is just a top tip in the software. So keep an eye out for those just to bank all of your top tips.
Well then, Becky, let's get started.
So my first tip for you is all about offsetting open vectors. So in the offset vectors form, we have the option to go right, left, or both. Now, sometimes it's kind of hard to determine whether I'm going right or whether I'm going left. The software actually helps you out here. So if we just select our open vectors here, and whilst we're in the offset vectors form with our vectors selected, you'll see that we have a black square here, a black square there, and we've got a black square here. Now this black square actually represents our start point for that vector. And so if we wanted, for instance, this line here to go down, the easiest way to know whether you want to go right or left is to imagine that you're stood on this black square looking down the actual line of your vector, and that will determine if you want to go right or left. And same for this middle one. So if we wanted the vector to be offset upwards, standing on this node here, looking down our vector, we'd want to go in the right position. And so if we go ahead and if we use the right option there and offset that, you'll see the result that we've got there. So again, because we went right, so looking at this node here, right looking down here takes you down, which has created this vector. Right looking down this vector down the line here goes up in this direction, and then the start point for the top vector here is on this side, and so looking down that vector, right takes our new vector down like so. And so that's the easiest way to determine whether you want to go right or left. Just imagine yourself stood on that black square looking down the vector to help choose which way you actually want to offset those vectors.
If you ever want to copy a component in our software, there's all kinds of different ways to do that. One of the ones that I'm sure you're all familiar with is going ahead and selecting a component and going up to Edit and choose Copy and Paste, or Control-C and Control-V. But there is another way to do it right directly in your component tree. So let's say I want to make a copy of my seaweed number 1. What I can do is I can left click on the seaweed number 1 component, hold down my control key, and drag up in my component tree, let go of my left mouse button, and you see that now I have a copy right here ready for me in my component tree. I can also do that between levels as well if I want to. It just doesn't have to stay within the same level. Now that I have that copy here in my composite model, I can go ahead and grab that. I can move it over to the other side of my layout. I can press H on my keyboard to flip it, make a few little positioning adjustments here to make it look a little bit different than the other side. And there you have it. It's that easy. So there's a great little tip for you right inside your component tree. Hold down your control key and drag a component, and it will make a copy.
So in the software, when you are working on a file, if you wanted to be reminded about something when you next open the file, you can actually add notes into the file. So to do that, you can simply go to Edit and then go to Notes here. And then if you start this with a full stop, so you can see it says here to have notes auto open when files loaded, start notes with a full stop. So if we put a full stop in there, and then I could say, remember to change the address. And then that way I'll know that when I come to open this to change the address for my generic shell sign, and I can OK that. Then I could just go ahead and press File, Save, and then we'll go to File and Close. And if we go and open that file again, if we click on that, because we've put that dot in, you'll see that this notes box has come up and it says remember to change the address, and so I'll remember to change that address because of that note.
Base heights aren't just for components. Now, this is something that a lot of people either don't know or don't use very often and sometimes forget about, is that we can actually add base heights to levels. So if you do that, what will happen is anything that's on that level will end up having a starting base height right off the bat. Now, what I have in front of you right here is a really good example of that. We have a layout that I made. It's got 3 different components over here. It's got the plaque number 1 in the background. It's got a pint glass. But you can see the pint glass is starting to merge into the back of that plaque, and that means that the back of the plaque isn't right on the modeling plane. So in order to fix this, we need to add a little bit of base height to the pint glass. And in the same respect, the banner is starting to merge in a little bit on the edges here and so on. And so we probably should fix that. Now we could go ahead and go into each one of these components individually and select them and add a base height that's equal to the back of this plaque. And now you can see that if I hover over that plaque in my 2D view, down here in my bottom right hand corner, you'll see that I'll get a height, which is 0.136. So we'll round it up to 0.14. So what I'd need to do if I wanted to add the base height to these individual components is choose one, go to my base height, type in 0.14 spacebar, close, and then go to my banner and so on and do the same. Now, with this particular layout, that's probably pretty easy, right? It's just 2 components. But if you had a much bigger layout with that's much more complicated, then that could be quite a hassle. So let's just undo that one for me. And now let's go ahead and do it in a way that makes a little bit more sense if you're going to create a more complicated layout, or you're going to be swapping in different components into this layout and you want to make sure that it has a starting base height that's equal to the back of this plaque. So to do that, I'm going to right click over here on my pub sign level and I'm going to insert a new level, and then what we're going to do is with that level selected, we'll go up to our component properties. And this is the component properties for level number 1. And we're going to give it a base height of 0.14. Press the space bar and go close. Now, what happens when I grab this pint glass and move it up onto that level, it's automatically going to get that base height. And you'll see around the area here, ignore this part at the bottom, but around this area up here where it's laying flat on the back of this plaque, it has that base height. And I can do that as well with the banner. Now the problem with this at the bottom, why everything is sort of acting funny down here, is because this level is an add level. So let's right click on that and we'll change that combine mode to be merge, and everything will sort itself out. Now another great thing about this, like I had mentioned, anything that we put on that level is going to get that starting base height. So let's go to our clipart tab and let's bring in this 4-leaf clover and we'll just pop it on there. And we're going to use this as a small detail, maybe down here in the corner of my layout. And as you see, it's already laying on top of that background, even though it's on level number 1. That's because that level has that base height. And also you'll notice that when I hover over top of that, the tooltip that pops up says base Z is 0.14.
Now, if you've downloaded and installed any tutorial files, you can easily access them right from the startup screen. So over in the left-hand pane, you can see we've got video tutorials. So this option takes you to the video browser, and this option takes you to the tutorial files folder. And if we click on that, that will open up the location of where your tutorials are stored. And then you can simply go in and select the tutorial you're after. For example, we could select the Avalon nameplate, go into the files, and then open up that particular file where it will open up in the software.
As probably most of you know, I'm a huge fan of using content for things that you don't expect them to be used for, especially when it comes to the design and make content that I help create. And I really have this thing for clouds. They can be used for all kinds of different things. And in this case, I'm going to show you how to use a cloud to make a shadow under a motorbike and to make the water look a little bit more interesting around a boat. So here you'll see here over on our left-hand side in our component tree, I've got two different levels set up, one called bike, one called boat. On the bike level, I've got the vintage motorcycle, and on the boat level, I have lake water and the man in a boat. Now, if I go to my clipart tab, I'm going to look at the waterside project called the Fishing Village, and I'm going to double click on the cloud, and that will pop that right into whatever level I happen to have selected over here in my component tree, and I had the bike level was highlighted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it up into place just under my bike. I'm going to stretch it out long, just using my transform handles here. We'll make it really quite thin, and then we'll position it under the bike like so and see what we have. It's not so bad. It's kind of merging in funny. So let's go ahead and change the shape height. We're going to use our floating properties dialog by clicking that solid square handle here while I have that component selected. And I can change the shape height of this to be 0.1 of an inch. Maybe we'll see what we get. Yeah, that's not so bad. Let's actually rotate this all the way around so it's pointing the other way up. So the top, we're flipping it over here like so. That might be a little bit better. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. Move that into where we think it should be. Squish it up a little bit more. And there we go. I think that looks pretty nice as a shadow or some dirt underneath that motorbike. And it started out as being a cloud. So over here in our component tree, let's select that cloud, hold down my control key, and drag it up into the boat level. That'll make a copy up there for me. And you can't quite tell that, but it's actually sitting here. And we'll drag that down, and we're going to put it below the boat here. We'll just make it fit into our space around our boat. Again, let's just rotate that around so it's the other way around. Doesn't really matter, but I think it might work better that way. Let's give it a bit more shape height, excuse me. Let's give it 0.05. Let's give it, sorry, a little more than that. Let's make it 0.1. Let's make it 0.125. And we're slowly starting to come up a little bit. You'll see now we're starting to create some water brushing up on the side of the boat. That looks pretty neat. Let's just give it a little bit more. Let's make it 1.5. And there we have it. Now let's close that down and take a look at that. And there we have. It actually makes it look like the boat is moving through the water. And that looks pretty neat. Again, using a cloud to create some movement or an extra component to add a little bit more detail to your layouts.
Looking back at our startup page, you can actually customize how many files are actually shown in the recently opened files list. So for example, if we just open one of these that we've already looked at, and then if we go over into edit, and if we go to the options menu, you can see you've got lots of different options here to control various aspects of the software. But if we just come down the list, we'll see this option here. So recent file list size. So here we can edit that, and we can say, for instance, we only want it to show 2, for example, or you could put in a maximum, like for example, you could put in 8 or whatever it is you want. So let's just go with 2, and then we'll go and head and then press OK, and then we'll just close out of the software there. Okay, so you just need to do a little bit of a restart here. So let's just close out of the program, and then when we fire that back up, you'll see now that our recently open files list has now switched to just show 2 items in there.
You might remember this layout from a previous tip. I really like this layout a lot. I think it would look great in a seafood restaurant, maybe with the addition of some V-carving on it. But the problem is that when I was setting this layout up, I wasn't paying attention at all to how thick the composite model was getting, or my final layout was getting. But I want to cut it into something, and so I need to make sure that it's going to fit with inside that material. And instead of me going ahead and changing or adjusting all the different components to fit, then I want to take everything and scale it all at the same time. So to do that, what I can do is I can go over to my modeling tab and choose the scale Z height of all of the visible components. So that's my composite model. So let's just go ahead and click that. You can see at the top, it tells me my current Z height. Now, right now, the material that I want to cut it into is a 1/2 inch. So this definitely will not fit in the 1/2 inch. I could use this little slider here and adjust the percentage, but that's probably not going to help me much because I'm not really good with that. But if I choose to set an exact height, then I have the control that I want. So let's go ahead and set an exact height. And in this case, I want it to be less than a 1/2 inch. So let's go with 0.4 of an inch, and then we can click apply. And you see instantly all of my components are scaled properly in my composite model. So I can close this down now. I can click OK over here, and I can have a look at my layout and make any adjustments I would like to now to get all that nice detail that I want in the thickness of the material that I have on hand.
Now, when working with 3D items, for example, if we just bring this hat into our job, and if we just tile the windows and make sure that our view is in the 3D view here, what we can do is we can look at calculating the volume of any given composite model that we have within our 3D view, which can be quite useful if you're wanting to work out the volume for practical reasons, such as you want to make a mold and you want to know, for example, you might want to fill that with epoxy or something, then this top tip will help you do that. So with your focus in the 3D view where your composite model is in view as well, you can press Ctrl, Shift, Alt and the letter V for volume, and then the software will tell you the approximate volume of the composite model, and it will tell you that in cubic inches or cubic metric. And so then you'll know how much you need, how much volume of something you need to then kind of fill in that void if that's the sort of work that you're doing.
I'm sure if you use 3D content a lot, you've run into this problem where you have a really great layout, but one component is a bit problematic. In this case, it's the saw that the gentleman's holding onto here is running into the edge of this round background. Now, I love the way the layout is working. Everything's working really fine, except for this little area. So what can I do? If I have a spire, no problem. I can do all kinds of things. But with VCarve Desktop or Pro, not so much. But let me show you how to get around that. And this happens to be VCarve Desktop. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at level number 2, and we're going to add a component on there. So if we go to our clipart tab, we're going to go up to our clipart that we've downloaded for free that came with my software. And in that, you're going to see that we have our domes and dishes. So let's look at that. And we're going to just click this dome right here, dome dish 45. And we'll bring that in and go back to our modeling tab. Now, that's ended up landing on level number 2. It's exactly where I want it. I'm just going to position it so that what happens is that the low thin end is on this side of the man. And as it rises up, then we're going to end up trying to get this top bit underneath the edge of that saw. So let's just go ahead and scale that up like so. Now that's perfect. Doesn't look so great right now. Let's go ahead and change this combine mode of the dome to be an add component. And we can see that now that we're starting to bow our woodworker on top of that dome, which looks really good, but it's really too high. So with that chosen, we can go ahead and change that shape height down to like 0.2 maybe, and see what we get in the end. Oh, that looks perfect. That's the perfect height that we need. But the problem is that we have all of this extra dome showing that we don't want to have showing. And along with, we have the his belly here is kind of sticking out a little high. So let's just see if we can reposition that dome just a little bit better for us. And that looks pretty good right there. And now what we're going to use a level effect called level clipping. But in order to do that, we need to have an actual vector to start working with. So let's close this down and let's grab our woodworker number 2 and have a look at our 2D view for a second. And with him selected, we can just go ahead and choose to create a vector boundary. So we're going to create that vector boundary, and we see we have that right now. But now what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a clipping vector for this level. So anything outside of that vector is going to be clipped away. So if we choose the level number 2, right click on that, and we choose clipping and we hit apply, nothing will change in our 3D view, but if we tile our view, you're going to see that it changes in our 3D view, and that worked out really well. We're using the part of the dome that's underneath the woodworker here to actually bump him up over top, or actually bend him over top of this edge piece. That's a great use of level clipping, and again, a component that you never thought could be used for something different than just being a dome.
Now, when you're tracing your bitmaps, you can actually choose the colours to trace directly from the bitmap itself. So with your bitmap selected, if you go over into the tool, Trace Bitmap, and if you click on that, I'll open up the Trace Bitmap tool. So here, if we just reduce the fade in of our bitmap there so we can better see our image. So typically you'd select a colour and then you'd go in here and then you'd choose the colour palette that you want to trace around. Well, you can actually just go ahead and select the colours directly from the bitmap itself. So for example, we could pull out the yellow colour there, and we could go ahead and we could preview that. You could take a different colour just by clicking in the bitmap on that colour, and it'll just kind of pull those out where you could then go ahead and preview them, apply them, and then close out.
This is one of those tips that I give out quite often when people come to me with a question of why their VCarving isn't showing up in their 3D toolpath preview. So first of all, let's take a look at this layout over here on in our 2D view. It's a wine bottle with some parchment paper here and then a nice background. And over here on our right hand side in our 3D view, we're looking at our toolpaths preview. So we're looking at the result of a roughing and then a finishing pass with a clearance tool. So that would be our rest machining. So we get all kinds of nice detail. Now, if we wanted to go ahead and add in some V-carving, most people will just go ahead and select all of that text, go over here and add in a V-carving toolpath. We could set our start depth if we wanted to at the height of this background here, but of course that wouldn't accommodate the change in height over here to our parchment paper. So what we can do is at the very bottom, we're going to choose to project our toolpath onto the 3D model. This is the trick right here. If you don't have that checked, then you're not going to see that toolpath in your 3D view, because it will actually either be projecting on the top of your material, or it'll be using the number at the very top here, your start depth, and that might give you some very strange results on this higher section here. So let's go ahead and calculate that. And if we preview that visible toolpath, you'll see that that text actually runs along this curved surface, just like you would expect it to, because we've actually projected that right onto that surface and also the flat surface back here.
Okay, so guides are actually a very useful way to help lay out designs in the 2D view. So to get a guide, you simply pull on the ruler and you can just drag that down or up, and you can go onto the side here and drag that across. You can see that those guys are just coming into place, and I can snap them to other vectors if I wanted to, like so. Now, a really useful tip here is if you right click on one of the guides, that will just bring up the guide properties, and you can use this option here to lock the guide to prevent it from dragging. And so you can do that to all of the other guides as well. So you can say lock guide here, and then as well, so now when I come to drag it, you can see I'm not able to do so. However, over here, if I click on that, I'm able to move that around. So it's handy to know that you can lock your guides. Now, if you're wanting to keep your guides rather than deleting them, you can actually switch off the visibility of the guides just so that they're not in the way, but you're able to get back to them should you need to. And you can do that by clicking on this button over here. So a lot of people don't know this is actually a button, but if you click on that, you can see it just temporarily hides the guides. And then if you click back on that, it brings the guides back up again.
Ever think it would be handy to know what the thickness is underneath your mouse pointer of a double-sided job? So let's say you wanted to know how thick it was right here in the middle of this wine bottle. Well, it's really easy to do. This job is a very simple double-sided job. We have a wine bottle on one side, and I've copied that same wine bottle over to the other side, so it looks like, or when it's all done cutting, it'll be a squished wine bottle. And I've got my two-sided or my double-sided view turned on up here. So all I need to do is simply hold down my control key and hover over top of my model. And if you look down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see that the thickness is right there. So that's holding down my control key and hovering over a two-sided project. And as long as I have my double-sided view turned on, I'm going to be able to figure out what my thickness is underneath my mouse pointer. It's that easy.
So did you know that you can automatically size a block of text to fit inside the boundary box, that being the width and the height of a selected vector or vectors? So to do that, for example, let's say we wanted some text to sit perfectly inside of this rectangle here. With that selected, we can use this option here, so draw text within a vector box, and then here we could simply go in and type our text. So you could type in text in a box, and you can see that it just fills that out according to the actual size of the box that we're using. And as well, you can look at adding in margins if you wanted to. You can make it wide. We'll just stick to normal there. And another example, if we take this circle here, so again, like I mentioned, that it will automatically size the block of text to fit inside the boundary box. So that's the width and the height. So regardless of what the shape is, it's just going to take the bounds of the actual shape itself. And so, for example, we could say circle, or we could say text in a circle, like so. And you can see it's just fitting inside of that circle. And then better still, when we come to edit this text, for example, if we just delete that circle there, we take that text and then we go on to edit that, it's still text in a circle, still in a circle, or at least the bounds of the actual object, and it just remembers that.
Ever find yourself in need of a little bit of help? Well, there's a couple different ways you can get it in our software. Of course, you can go right to our help menu and take a look at our help contents, which is a great resource for you. But if you're in the middle of a form, there's even an easier way to do it, so you can get the proper information for the form that you're in. All you need to do is look for the little question mark at the very top of the form. If you click that, you'll see right away your browser will pop up and it'll take you right to the help for that form. And in this case, if you want a little more information on the rest machining, you just need to scroll through this information and find what you're looking for, and there you have it, all the help that you need. Just look for that little question mark.
Okay, so that was a rundown of the 16 favourite tips from myself and Todd. Okay, so if you've not yet signed up to the forum, then we highly recommend it. So not only are the Vectric and Design Make newsletters archived there, users are also sharing their top tips and their knowledge, whether that be of the software, finishing tips, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and if you have your own top tip right now that you want to share with us right now during this user group meeting, pop it in the comments below, and you never know, that may show up at the top of one of our newsletters or in one of our social posts.
So thank you for watching this video. We hope that you liked it. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. And if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then please hit that subscribe button for instant updates on the latest videos that we'll be releasing. Thank you for watching.
I hope you're still having fun.
And happy making.